How's it going, everyone? Welcome to the College Football Podcast with Alec Pecano. Today's video, I will be reacting to my preseason conference predictions from college football in this video today. Let's get started with the Conference USA.
And there's quite a few. The first one is FIU, and I think FIU is going to go 3-9 this year. I just don't for FIU. I can't see them winning more than 3 games due to the exasperated fact that they don't move the needle for me at all. And their schedule's not particularly easy. I've looked at all these schedules for Conference USA before the season, and I don't think that FIU can win more than 3 games. The next team.
So I don't think I was that far off with FIU. If you look at their record right now, they are not very good. So I think I was kind of spot on with that. Now let's see what I had to say about the next team.
I'm going to talk about is Kennesaw State. And yes, Kennesaw State used to be an ASUN team for every sport, including football. Now they've moved up to the big boys, and they're in Conference USA. And unfortunately, it's not going to be a good first year for Kennesaw State in the Conference USA. I think they go 4-8. Kennesaw State, there's some people saying that Kennesaw State's going to win way less than 4 games. I see 4 potential wins on their schedule. And so I think they go 4-8.
This is the first one where I will admit I was very wrong on Kennesaw State. They only have 2 wins. Now, they could get to 3 winning this, beating their whoever they play this week. But I was way off on having them win 4 games. But there's always next year.
The next non-bowl team in the Conference USA is Sam Houston. I think Sam Houston's going to go 5-7. I like the trajectory that Sam Houston's on, though. I think they have a shot at moving up and becoming one of the better teams in Conference USA within the next 2 or 3 years.
Okay, so half of that I was right on. I was right on the part where I said they have an upward trajectory. I was wrong saying they were going 5-7. If they win this week, they will be in the CUSA championship game against Liberty. If Liberty wins. So I was right on that. I was wrong on saying that we're going to go 5-7. Now let's see what I have to say about the next team.
And the last non-bowl team in Conference USA for me is Middle Tennessee State. The Blue Raiders, I have them going 4-8 in 2024. I have a tough time finding a way that Middle Tennessee could make a bowl game in 2024. I don't like their schedule. Looks really hard to me, and there's only 4 possible games I can see them winning. But now,
okay, so I think I was very close on Middle Tennessee State on MTSU's win total. And I think I was right by saying that they were not going to be very good this year in 2024. And now let's see what I had to say about the rest of the Conference USA.
and I'm going to give you between the potential conference winners and between the non-bowl teams and potential conference winners, My overall thoughts on Conference USA this year are that I feel like it's still going to be a lot. It's going to still be very competitive. And I feel like that there's going to be a lot of good games in Conference USA this year. But I also feel like there's going to be some games that are blowouts. That's my overall thoughts on Conference USA. Now let's get to the potential conference winners.
So, and I think that's another thing I was right on with Conference USA was the fact that I thought that there would be some games that are good games, like Kennesaw State Liberty. I thought that was going to be a good game. And I also thought that there'd be some games that are blowouts, which has also been a thing this year.
And the first one is Western Kentucky. And this is Western Kentucky's final season in Conference USA, as they will be moving to the Mid-American Conference next season. I think Western Kentucky in their final year in the Conference USA will go 8-4. This is, like I said, the last year for Western Kentucky in the Conference USA. And I have a tough time seeing them not being competitive this year. I think they will be very competitive, and they might win this conference. I don't know. You'll have to see who I have in the conference championship game.
So I was spot on with Western Kentucky as a potential conference winner. If you look at it, they're one of the 4 teams that has a shot at making the conference championship game.
Next is Louisiana Tech. And I have Louisiana Tech going 9-3 in 2024. I like what Louisiana Tech has done somewhat in the portal and in recruiting. I think they're in for a really good season this year. Next, I have Jackson.
Okay. I was wrong. I was way off with Louisiana Tech. And I admit that I was wrong on Louisiana Tech. I said 9-4. Look at their record. They are not going 9-4, obviously. They might be lucky to get to 5 wins. And they will probably have a new head coach. So there's that.
Jacksonville State
Now let's see what I had to say about Jacksonville State.
Going 10-3. And I think Jacksonville State goes 10-3 in 2024. And I can see where Jacksonville State positions himself very well for maybe a conference championship. And the next team I have.
Okay. Another one that I had that I was kind of right. Other than the record, I was right on. They have a spot. They have a potential to be in the conference championship game this year. And I was right on that. And now let's see what I had to say about the next Conference USA team.
Have is New Mexico State. Yes, I understand they lost Jerry Kill. He left and went to Vanderbilt to be an offensive positions coach at Vandy. But I still think New Mexico State's in a good spot. I think they go 11-3.
Oof. Okay. I was wrong on New Mexico State. They are one of the worst teams in Conference USA this year. And we will see how they end up doing. But I don't think they're going to a bowl game. Now, who's the next team I talked about in Conference USA?
In 2024. And my final team that could potentially win Conference USA in 2024 is Liberty. and I have them going a nice and easy 12-1. I know there's people out there that are going to say Liberty is going to go 13-0. I think there's a potential for Liberty to lose at least one game, maybe two. But I see one at the most. And now we get to my top 5 teams.
Okay, so again, I was right with Liberty. I said they were going to lose. I did kind of predict their record. I said they were going to either lose 1 or 2 games. And they've lost 1 game, and it was to Kennesaw State. So now let's see what I had to say about the top 5 in Conference USA.
In the Conference USA, at number 5, I have Western Kentucky going 8-4. Like I said, I think Western Kentucky is going to be a top 5 team in Conference USA this year. Number 4, Louisiana Tech at 9-3. Third is Jacksonville State.
Okay, I was wrong on Louisiana Tech.
Second, New Mexico State. And first, Liberty. My Conference USA championship game is Liberty and New Mexico State, with Liberty winning the Conference USA. Now,
okay, so Liberty, I might get Liberty right. They might be in the conference championship game.
I don't want to end this, so I'm going to continue. I see potential for, actually, why don't we share my screen? New tab. And why don't we go pull up we are going to pull up the week 1 schedule for Conference USA. And so we got Jacksonville State and Coastal Carolina. That's a Thursday night game. And look at the line. Jacksonville State -3. Why do I have a feeling this is going to be a very competitive game between Coastal? On today's podcast episode,
Next, we are moving on to the ACC.
to the 4th and Long podcast, I will be going over my ACC preview for the 2024 college football season with my thoughts and predictions for the ACC, with record predictions and standings. And let's get right into it. We are first going to do the record predictions for all the ACC teams, which also means we start with the non-bowl teams. And the first non-bowl team in the ACC this year, I believe, is going to be Stanford. So why don't we get to Stanford?
I was right about Stanford. Let's see what I had their record being.
Schedule this year. So Stanford opens the year at home against TCU. And my thoughts on Stanford this year is I think they're going to struggle in year 1 in the ACC this year. It's going to take them a couple years to get used to being in a new conference. As you all remember, for the longest time, they were in the Pac 12. And they had some good years under David Shaw, but now they've got a different style of coach in there. And Troy Taylor, I believe that is the Stanford head coach. And I don't see where Stanford can win. I'm going to say more than 3 games this year, and let's go over their schedule now. So Stanford, like I said, they open the year at home against TCU. I think they will lose to TCU, so they're 0-1. They will get their first one against Cal Poly. So they're 1-1. Then they go to Syracuse. That's going to be a loss. So they're 1-2. Then they go to Clemson. I think they lose to Clemson. Then they come home and play Virginia Tech. Now, normally I would put this as a win for Stanford, but I think they lose. So their only win so far is against Cal Poly. And they've lost to TCU, Syracuse, Clemson, Virginia Tech. So they're 1-4. Then they go to Notre Dame. That is a rivalry. That is a game they play every season. And I know technically it is not an ACC game, but I still think they lose. So they're 1-5. Then they play SMU at home. I think they're going to be 1-6 after losing to SMU. Then they lose. Then their second one of the year comes against Wake Forest. So they're 2-6. But then they go right back to losing. They lose to NC State, 2-7. Lose to Louisville, 2-8. Lose to Cal, 2-9. And lose to San Jose State, 2-10. So Stanford's 2024.
You see where I am. I think I was spot on with this. We'll see if they lose to San Jose State this week. Who did I have next?
Record for me, in my opinion, is going to be 2-10. Next team is Pittsburgh.
First of all, before I start, I'm going to say this again at the end of the Pittsburgh one. I was wrong.
And for Pitt, I think they're going to have a decent year, but they have a new quarterback. And I don't know how that's going to work this year with Eli Holstein, because he didn't play at all last year at Alabama. But let's take a look at their schedule. So week 1, they start at home against Kent State. I think that's an easy win, so they're 1-0. Then they play Cincinnati at Cincinnati. I think that's going to be a loss, so they're 1-1. Then they come home and play West Virginia. They're going to be 2-1 as they 1-2 as they lose to West Virginia. 2-2 after they beat Youngstown State. Then they get North Carolina. I think that's going to be a loss, so they're 2-3. They beat Cal 3-3. Lose to Syracuse 3-4. Lose to SMU 3-5. Beat Virginia 4-5. Lose to Clemson 4-6. Lose to Louisville 4-7. And lose to Boston College 4-8. So I think Pitt in 2020.
You could tell how wrong I was on Pitt. They started the year undefeated. And I mean, they've lost 4 games now. So I had four, if you flip the wins, I was wrong on Pitt. I will admit.
24 goes 4-8. And I don't think Pat Narduzzi gets fired. The next team that I do not think makes a bowl game is Virginia. And Virginia's schedule. So my thoughts on Virginia this year is I think they're going to be just as bad as they were last year, maybe even worse, because they have some promise at quarterback, but I don't see them winning more than maybe 3 games. And let's take a look at their schedule. They start the year at home against Richmond. I think they beat Richmond, so they're 1-0. Then they play Wake Forest. I think they lose to Wake Forest, so they're 1-1. Then they play Maryland at home. That's also going to be a loss, so they're 1-2. Then they get a tough road game at Coastal Carolina. They are going to lose that, so they're 1-3. Then they play Boston College the next week, so they're 1-3. I think they lose to Boston College, so they're 1-4. And I think it's after that game where Tony Elliott gets fired.
Okay, so I was wrong. Tony Elliott still has a job. He has not been fired yet. Let's see what else I had to say about the rest of what their record was at the end of the season.
Yes. Sorry about that. They lose to Louisville 1-5. Lose to Clemson 1-6. Lose to North Carolina 1-7. Lose to Pitt 1-8. Lose to Notre Dame 1-9. Beat SMU 2-9, and lose to Virginia Tech 2-10. So I think.
Okay, so I was astronomically off with Virginia's record prediction for this year. I said 2 wins. They've won 5 games. And Tony Elliott has probably, at least until next year, saved his job as head coach at Pitt. I mean at Virginia. At Virginia.
Virginia also goes 2-10. And the last non-bowl team we have for 2024 for the ACC is Wake Forest.
I think I might have been spot on with Wake Forest record.
So Wake Forest, I see them missing a bowl game this year, and this being like a retooling year for Wake Forest and the ACC. Let's take a look at their schedule. And so they have a cupcake game week 1. Week 1, they play North Carolina A&T. I think they're going to win that game, so they're 1-0. They beat Virginia, so they're 2-0. Then they play Ole Miss. That's going to be a loss, so they're 2-1. Then they play Louisiana. They're going to be 3-1 after beating Louisiana. Then they play at NC State. They're going to lose to NC State, 3-2. They lose to Clemson, 3-3. Beat UConn, 4-3. Beat Stanford, 5-3. lose to Cal 5-4, lose to North Carolina 5-5, lose to Miami 5-6, and lose to Duke 5-7. So I think Wake Forest goes 5-7 in 2024. Now
I think they're 4-6, 4-7 right now. If they beat Duke, they will be 5-7. So I think with Wake Forest, I was spot on with their record prediction.
now we get to my sleepers for the ACC in 2024. And my first sleeper team is Boston College.
Okay,
And
let's
they
see what I have
start
to
the
say.
year Monday, September 2nd at Florida State. That is going to be a loss. So they're 0-1.
Already, I can see that I was wrong. They beat Florida State. I should have called and said that was going to be an upset, but I didn't. I was wrong on them losing to Florida State.
And my thoughts on Boston College, I think they're going to be a team that surprises a lot of people this year.
I wasn't wrong on that. I said they would be a team, a ACC team that surprises people, and I think I'm spot on with that. Let's see what I had their record being.
Bill O'Brien is their head coach. They did bring back Thomas Castellanos, and they have a few other guys on offense that are going to be really good. But back to their schedule. Here's their prediction on their record for me. So they're 0-1 to start the season. Then they play Duquesne. They're going to beat Duquesne. Then they play at Missouri. That's going to be a loss. So they're 1-2. They lose to Michigan State 1-3. Beat Western Kentucky 2-3. Beat Virginia 2-4. 3-4. Lose to Virginia Tech. Wait, no. So they lose to Florida State 0-1. Beat Duquesne 1-1. Lose to Missouri 1-2. Lose to Michigan State 1-3. Beat Western Kentucky 2-3. Beat Virginia 3-3. Lose to Virginia Tech 3-4. Now, I want to say they're going to beat Louisville, but I could be wrong. But I do think they end up beating Louisville. So they're now 4-4 on the season. Then they go to Syracuse comes to play them. I think they beat Syracuse. So they're 5-4. Then they go to SMU and lose to SMU, so they're 5-5. Then they play North Carolina at home. That's going to be a loss. So they're 5-6, and they beat Pitt to go to 6-6. So Boston College is 20.
Okay, so I think I'm very close to being right about Boston College's win total.
24 record for me is 6-6. My next sleeper team in the ACC is Syracuse. And you might hear me talk about their coach later on at the end of the episode. But I like what Syracuse did in the portal this year, getting a bunch of guys. And let's take a look at their schedule. So week 1, they play at home against Ohio. That's going to be a win. So they're 1-0. They play Georgia Tech. That's a coin flip for me. I think they beat Georgia Tech, though. So they're 2-0. Then they play Stanford 3-0. 4-0 after they beat Holy Cross. I think they get a chance to start 5-0 because they're going to beat UNLV. Then they get back into conference play, and they play at North Carolina State. That's going to be their first loss of the year, so they're 5-1. They beat Pitt 6-1, lose to Virginia Tech 6-2. lose to Boston College 6-3, beat Cal 7-4, beat UConn 8-4, and lose to Miami 8-5. So Syracuse is 20.
Okay, so and y'all can let me know in the comments how close I am to getting this one right, or if I was way off, because I think I was pretty spot on with my analysis on Syracuse's record for 2024.
2024 record for me is 8-5. My next sleeper team in the ACC in 2024 is North Carolina.
Oh, yikes! Yikes!
And let me give you my thoughts on North Carolina real quick. I think they're going to be good, but how good can they be without Drake May, who is now on the New England Patriots? I apologize for that. So week 1, they start the season at Minnesota. I think that's going to be a win, so they're 1-0. Then they play Charlotte. They're going to be 2-0. Then they play North Carolina Central. That's a win, so they're 3-0. Now, I'm circling this game against James Madison. To me, I'm not going to say it's a coin toss, but I think they might lose to James Madison.
Well, I nailed that. I said they might lose to James Madison, and they ended up losing to James Madison.
But they don't. So they are 4-0. Going into ACC play, they play at Duke. They're going to beat Duke 5-0. Beat Pitt 6-0. They take their first loss at home against Georgia Tech. So they are now 6-1. They beat Virginia 7-1. Lose to Florida State 7-2. Beat Wake Forest 8-2. Lose to Boston College 8-3. And lose to North Carolina State 8-4.
Okay, so I was completely, other than the James Madison, where I said I think they might lose to James Madison, I was right on that. Because if you go back and look at James Madison, North Carolina game, James Madison ended up winning. And I was wrong on North Carolina's record. I said 8-5, 9-4, or 8-5. And I was way off. They're going to go 6-6.
So North Carolina's record for me in 2024 will be 8-4. My next and final sleeper team in the ACC in 2024 is Duke. Now, I know I questioned the hire of Manny Diaz when it first happened, but I actually like the hire of Manny Diaz for Duke. And I like bringing in Malik Murphy. And now why don't we take a look at their 2024 schedule? They start the year at home against Elon. I think they're going to win that game. They should. So they're 1-0. They play at Northwestern the next week. They're going to win that game. And that's a Friday night game, so they're 2-0. Then they get UConn, 3-0. 4-0 after playing Middle Tennessee. Then they go and play at North Carolina. At home against North Carolina. That is where they take their first loss. So they're now 4-1. I think they lose 3 straight. So they're 4-3 because they lose to North Carolina, Georgia Tech, Florida State. Then they get back on the winning ledger, and they beat SMU. So they're now 5-3. They lose to Miami 5-4. Beat North Carolina State 6-4. lose to Virginia Tech 6-5, and beat Wake Forest 7-5.
So I was very close on Duke. I said 7-5. Let's see.
Duke's record for me in 2024 is 7-5. Now we get to my potential conference winners, and the first one is North Carolina State.
Ouch. I was wrong on North Carolina State. I'm already going to say that.
I can find North Carolina State. So, North Carolina State, I like what they did in the portal. They bring in Grayson McCall from Coastal Carolina, and they got a couple receivers from the portal as well as a couple guys on defense. And I think overall they're going to have a really good season in 2024. Now, why don't we take a look at their schedule? They start the year at home against Western Carolina. That's going to be an easy win. Now, I've circled their week 2 game versus Tennessee. That is a big game on their schedule this year. And Tennessee's going to be one of the better teams in the SEC. As you've seen, if you haven't seen my SEC conference preview, I recommend going and watching that after this video. As you see where I have Tennessee, I think North Carolina State loses to Tennessee, so they're 1-1. But then they go, they have another home game next week, play Louisiana Tech. They'll beat Louisiana Tech. They beat Georgia, so they start the year 0. Beat Duke 6-5, beat Georgia Tech 7-5, and beat North Carolina 8-5.
So I was kind of wrong on North Carolina State, but let's see what I had to say about Clemson.
So I think North Carolina State gets 8-5 in 2024. My next potential conference winner for the ACC is Clemson. And Clemson, I don't know what my stance is on them. I think they're going to be good this year, but they could have another underwhelming year. And the elephant in the room here is their week 1 game against Georgia. I don't think they beat Georgia. So they start the year 0-1. Then they get App State. I think they beat App State. So they're 1-1. Now, that App State game could also end up being a loss because App State has the tendency to upset our bigger schools. But I do think Clemson beats them. So they're 1-1. Then they lose to North Carolina State, so they're 1-2. Beat Stanford 2-2. Lose to Florida State 2-3. Beat Wake Forest 3-4. Beat Virginia 4-4. Lose to Louisville 4-5. Lose to Virginia Tech 4-6. Beat Pitt 5-6. Beat the Citadel 6-6. And beat South Carolina 7-6. So I think Clemson in 2024 goes 7-6.
I was way off on Clemson. I'm going to admit that right now. I was way off on Clemson. And I have a feeling Florida State's next, and I am ready for the slander.
Next potential conference winner is Virginia Tech.
Okay. I was way off on Virginia Tech, too. They let me down.
And let's see. Can I find... So Virginia Tech, they return a lot on offense and defense this year. And I think they're going to be one of the best teams in the ACC. Let's take a look at their schedule. Week 1, they play at Vanderbilt. That's going to be an easy win, so they're 1-0.
I was
wrong.
wrong.
Then they play Marshall week 2. I think they beat Marshall. So they're 2-0. Beat Old Dominion 3-0. Rutgers is going to be a really good team this year, but I don't think they have the firepower to beat Virginia Tech. So Virginia Tech wins that game. Virginia Tech is now 4-0. So they're 4-0 going into the Miami game. That's where they take their first loss. So they're 4-1. But then they beat Stanford 4-2, 5-1. Lose to Boston, beat Boston College 6-1. Lose to Georgia Tech 6-2. I think they end up losing to Syracuse 6-3. Beat Clemson 7-3.
Oof.
Beat Duke 8-3, and beat Virginia 9-3. So
Okay. Slam me in the comments. I was way off with what I said about Virginia Tech in the preseason. I was very off. And we do these kind of videos where I do conference reviews every year before the season. Next year, I might think twice before putting Virginia Tech anywhere near being a potential conference winner.
I think Virginia Tech goes 9-3 in 2024. My next potential conference winner in the ACC is Miami, Florida.
Okay, so
And Miami, Florida had two big additions in the transfer portal. One being Damian Martinez from Oregon State, and the other one being Cameron Ward from Washington State. But let's take a look at, and overall, I think Miami has the best chance. If not, and you'll hear my conference championship game in a few minutes. If not, the two teams I have in the conference championship game, I think Miami has the third best odds, in my opinion, of making the conference championship game. But they start the year at Florida. I think they beat Florida. So they're 1-0. Then they play Florida A&M. That's going to be a win, so they're 2-0. Then they play Ball State, 3-0. Now, week 4, they could, and I'm going to say this truthfully, they could be looking ahead to that Virginia Tech game. This could be a South Florida game. It's at South Florida. It could be a trap game for Miami. They could be looking ahead a week to Virginia Tech. But I do think they beat South Florida. And you will see in a future video, I do think there might be upset potential for Miami against South Florida. But the other way around, being South Florida upsetting Miami. But in this video, I'm going to say Miami beats South Florida. So Miami is now 4-0. Then they play Virginia Tech at home. It's a night game at Hard Rock Stadium. I think they lose to Virginia Tech, so they're 4-1. Beat Cal 5-1. Lose to Louisville.
So I was wrong when I said they were going to lose to Virginia Tech. They should have lost, but they escaped against Virginia Tech. And yes, they did beat Cal, but it took a comeback.
5-2. I somehow think they will beat Florida State. So they're 6-2 now. Then they play Duke. I think they're going to beat Duke. As I said when I did Duke's record prediction, I have Miami beating Duke. So there's 8-2. They lose to Georgia Tech 8-3, beat Wake Forest 9-3, and lose to Syracuse 9-4. So Miami's 2024 record prediction is 9-4.
Okay. I was way off on Miami. No, I wasn't wrong that they are a potential ACC conference winner. Because if they win this week against Syracuse, they will be in the conference championship game.
with the potential of a couple other losses being turned into wins. Maybe the Louisville game gets a win, and that makes them 10-3. Maybe they beat Syracuse to go 11-2. Same thing with all these potential conference winners I have for the ACC. There's a couple games where they could flip their record around. And my next potential conference winner in the ACC is Florida State.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
They start the year at Georgia. Well, they start the year.
I'm going to say right off the bat that I completely missed with Florida State. I didn't think they were going to be this terrible.
For the game against Georgia Tech and that's week 0. I think they beat Georgia Tech.
Again, I was wrong. They lost to Georgia Tech.
Oh, I missed Georgia Tech. We're going to do Georgia Tech after Florida State. So I think they beat Georgia Tech, so they're 1-0. Then they play Boston College. They will beat Boston College, so they're 2-0.
I was wrong again.
Then they get Memphis.
Lost.
And I think that Memphis game is going to be one of the better teams in the AAC. But I think Florida State beats them, so they're 4-0. Then they play Cal at home. They will beat Cal, so they're 5-0. Beat SMU 6-0. Lose to Clemson. No, lose to Clemson 6-1. Beat Duke 7-1. Lose to Miami. Beat Miami 6-2. No, 7-1. Beat North Carolina 8-1. Lose to Notre Dame 8-2. Beat Charleston Southern 9-2, and beat Florida 10-2.
Okay. As we can all see, Florida State is awful this year. 2-9. I was dramatically off with Florida State. Let's see what I had to say about Georgia Tech.
Florida State's 2024 record prediction for me is 10-2. Now, I missed a sleeper team in the ACC, and we're going to put them in this. They were supposed to be in the sleeper category. I forgot, and it's Georgia Tech. And I like what Georgia Tech's got going for them. They start the year in Dublin against Florida State. Obviously, that's going to be a loss. Then they play Georgia State. I think they beat Georgia State, so they're 1-1. And then they play Syracuse. They lose to Syracuse, so they're 1-2. Then they play VMI. They beat VMI 2-2. Lose to Louisville 2-3. Beat Duke 3-3. Lose to North Carolina 3-4. Lose to Notre Dame 3-5. Beat Virginia Tech 4-5. Lose to Miami 4-6. Somehow I think they beat Georgia Tech, so they're 5-6. And do I think they beat Georgia? Maybe. I'm going to give them the one right now, but that could always be changed at some point. So they go 6-6.
Okay, I think I was really close on Georgia Tech. Let's see if they beat Georgia this week.
My last potential conference winner in the ACC. Oh, wait, no. I completely forgot it. Yeah, I completely forgot SMU. Let's do SMU. They're also a potential conference winner for me. They start the year at Nevada. I think they beat Nevada. They beat Houston Christian 2-0. Beat BYU 3-0. Beat TCU 4-0. Lose to Florida State 4-1.
They beat
Lose
Florida
to
State.
Louisville 4-2. beat Stanford 5-2, lose to Duke 5-3, beat Pitt 6-3, lose to Boston College 6-4, beat Virginia 7-4, and lose to Cal 7-5.
Okay, so SMU go. I was way off on SMU as well, saying they were going to go 7-5. They started the year with one loss, and they still have one loss, and they have a chance to be. I was right as a potential conference winner because they could be. Actually, they will be in the ACC championship game.
So I think SMU's first year in the ACC, they go 7-5. Now let's get to Cal, and then we will get to the last potential conference winner in Louisville. So Cal, I like what Coach Wilcox has done at Cal. Let's look at their schedule for their first year in the ACC. So they start the year at home against UC Davis. That's going to be a win. Then they go and play Auburn. I think they beat Auburn, so they're 2-0. Then they play at home against San Diego State the next week. That's a win, so they're 3-0. But then look at that mini 2-game gauntlet they got after San Diego State. Florida State on the road, Miami at home. I think they lose to Florida State, so they're 3-1. Then they lose to Miami 3-2, beat Pitt 4-2, lose to NC State 4-3, beat Oregon State 5-3, beat Wake Forest 6-3, lose to Syracuse 6-4, beat Stanford 7-4, and lose to SMU 7-5. No, beat SMU 7-5.
So that would have been 8-4. But I think I was close on Cal's record because they are not going to make the conference championship game.
So I think Cal's 2024 record for me is 7-5. And last but not least, we have oh no, we just did Miami. Whoops. I meant to click on Louisville. So Louisville, they start the year at home against Austin P. That's going to be a win, so they're 1-0. Then they play Jacksonville State. That's going to be a win, 2-0. Then they play Georgia Tech. I think they beat Georgia Tech 3-0. 4-0 after beating Notre Dame. 4-1 after losing to SMU. 5-1 after beating Virginia. 5-2 after losing to Miami. 6-2 after beating Boston College. 6-3 after losing to Clemson. 7-3 after beating Stanford. 8-3 after beating Pitt, and 9-3 after beating Kentucky. So I think Louisville in 2024 goes 9-3.
I think I might be close on that. Now we are going to go over to 53 minutes. Yeah, this is going to be a bit of a longer video.
And my first non-bowl team is Arizona State. And I also want to hear y'all's thoughts and opinions on my.
This is going to be the last one for today, and then we'll do the Big Ten and the SEC and the AAC. And then we're going to do a part 2 of this video and give you the rest of my thoughts and opinions on my preseason predictions. So let's hear what I had to say about the Big 12.
Big 12, conference preview. But starting with Arizona State. I have Arizona State going 3-9 this year. I think they're going to struggle in their first year in the Big 12. I do like the direction they're going in with Kenny Dillingham, but I think it's going to take maybe a couple years before they turn this rough stretch around and compete in the Big 12. And I don't really know who their quarterback's going to be in 2024. And I would have said Jaden Rashada, but he's not there. He is at Georgia now. And I just don't see a way Arizona State wins more than 3 games this year. And I'll give Kenny Dillingham's hot seat a 3 right now. It's getting to the point where it could be hot, but it's warm right now. It's a warm seat. Number 2, my second non-bowl team.
Okay, so I was way off projectably on Arizona State. They are probably going to make the Big 12 championship game, and you can laugh at me for who I had in the Big 12 championship game. It is probably going to be Arizona State and one of either Colorado, Iowa State, or BYU.
Is Houston. And the main reason I don't have Houston going to a bowl game in 2024 is because they are bringing in a new head coach with Willie Fritz. Now, I'm excited for Houston going forward in the Big 12. I like Willie Fritz. He was at Tulane the last few years, and I think Willie Fritz is going to do special things at Houston, but I think it's going to take maybe 1 or 2 years before Houston hits the ground running and competes. So therefore, Houston's 2024 record for me is 5-7.
Okay, I don't think I'm too far off with Houston's record. Now, who is the next team?
Which to me is overachieving in year number 1 under head coach Willie Fritz. My next non-bowl team is Baylor. And boy, the fall off of Baylor needs to be studied. Big time studied. And I think Baylor's going to go 2-10 this year.
Okay, so I was very far off on Baylor. As you can see, they probably will make a bowl game this year. I think they're 5-6 as of the making of this video. Now, I think BYU is next.
I do like the addition of Daquan Finn for Baylor, but why is it doing that? Sorry about that. We should be good now. I do like Daquan Fenn coming to Baylor. I still think that Baylor is not going to be that good this year, but I'm being harsh when I give them a 2-10 record because I could easily see them winning 5 games.
Okay, so there it is. I said 2-10, and I know I was being harsh. I said I could also see them winning 5 games, and look at that. They might actually pull that off and win 5 games. Now, who is next?
Being somewhat competitive, but David Randa's hot seat is very hot. To me, it's steaming, which means he could be fired if Baylor starts 0-3 or 0-4. I think Aranda gets fired at that point. And my final non-bowl team is Cincinnati. And they didn't do jack squat in the – I mean, they did a little bit in the portal. They got Brandon Sorsby from Indiana. But I just don't – I don't really see an avenue where Cincinnati wins more than 4 games this year. I have Cincinnati going 4-8.
Okay. I was wrong on 4-8. They're probably gonna win 6 games and go to a bowl game. Who did I have next?
In 2024. Now, then again, they could make a bowl game, but, and this is me being nice to them, I don't see them winning more than 4 games. Now, here are my bowl teams. The first one is BYU. BYU's the first bowl team I have. And I could see BYU. I think BYU goes 6-6. Now, I was very low on BYU last year. But I think this year, BYU wins at least 6 games, makes a bowl game, and they're a lot more competitive in year 2 in the Big 12 than they were in year number 1.
Okay, so with BYU, that's another team I was wrong. Not in terms of them making a bowl game, but their record. I was way off with their record. They started the year with 1 loss. They did lose to Arizona State last week in a crazy game, which if you haven't seen the highlights of that game, I highly recommend going back to last week and watching the highlights of the Arizona State BYU game.
My second bowl team is Kansas. Now, there's people out there saying that Kansas could win the Big 12 and make the playoff. Now, I can see that, but I'm going to be realistic here. I think Baylor wins. I think Kansas wins 7 games. They go 7-5. The big question for me with Kansas is, can Jalen Daniels and Devin Neal stay healthy the entire season? If they can, then I see a way that they make the playoff and win more than 7 games. But if they don't stay healthy, I can see them winning between 6 and 7 games, still making a bowl game and having a really good season. And Lance Leipold maybe getting poached away to a bigger school. My next bowl team.
Okay, so with Kansas, I might be right. They might win 7 games. They have a chance if they win this week, they're 6-6. And if they win their bowl game, that makes them 7-6. And they could go, they would finish with 7 wins, which is what I had them having.
Is TCU. Now, everybody's forgetting that TCU just a couple years ago was in the college football playoff. And I could see a world where TCU makes the playoff again. And we see TCU make the playoff, but I think TCU goes 6-6, makes a bowl game, and has a really good season. And they are very competitive in every single game. And my last bowl team.
Okay. I might be right on TCU. They might make a bowl game. But let's see what I had to say about the rest of the Big 12.
And this may surprise some people because they were a powerhouse in the AAC. It is UCF. I think UCF is going to go 7-5 this year. They lost John Rice Plumlee. They lost Javon Baker. They lost a lot. They had to replace a lot of guys. And I could see where UCF makes a bowl game for one, and two, they win that bowl game. Now here are my potential. Oh. Okay, now.
Okay, UCF. I was way off on UCF going 7-5. They're not going to make it to a bowl game potentially. Now let's see what I had to say about the next team.
Let me get to my sleepers. My first sleeper is Colorado. And I know I'm going to get some grief for putting Colorado as a sleeper because there's people that don't think Colorado is particularly going to win more than 5 games. I think they win more than 5 games. I think Colorado in 2024 goes 8-5 in the Big 12. And I think Colorado is a heck of a choice for a sleeper pick. And I'd even bet money on them to win more than 8 games. If you're a betting man, if you're a betting person like I am, I have a bet with 2 of my buddies that I went to college with. Well, one that I went to college with and one that I grew up with, that Colorado is going to win more than 5 games this year. As you see by my prediction, I have them winning 8. I like what Dion did in the portal. He retooled that offensive line and made it a lot better. And I think that Colorado has a really good opportunity here to win 8 games and maybe, if they win more than 8 games, maybe make the playoff. We'll see. My second sleeper is
okay. I was spot on with saying Colorado's a sleeper and they're going to win. They're right at 8 games right now. If they win this week, they win 9. And that bet I made with my buddy in the preseason, hey, he got to pay up. He lost.
Is Iowa State. And my last sleeper is called Iowa State. I think Iowa State goes 8-5 as well. We saw how good they did last year without basically 7 or 8 guys because of a betting scandal they had. But I think Iowa State goes 8-5 and makes a bowl game. Maybe they win more than 8 games, just like Colorado, and maybe they make the conference championship game. I will be giving him a conference championship game pick for the Big 12 here in a minute. Now, my potential conference winners for the Big 12.
Okay, first, Iowa State. I was right to call them a sleeper because, like I said earlier, They are one of the 4 teams left that could make the conference championship game. It's Iowa State, BYU, Colorado, and Arizona State. And I'm going to say this right now, and you can come back and look at this next season. I am going to have sky high expectations for both Colorado and Arizona State, and maybe BYU, and maybe Houston. Who knows?
The first one is Kansas State, and I think Kansas State's going to go 10-3 this year. Kansas State, they did lose. They did lose Will Howard to Ohio State, but I think that Kansas State, I like Avery Johnson. I think he's going to do just fine at K-State. And I like their schedule. Now, the only question I have about their schedule is can they beat I don't think they have to play Arizona. Can they beat K-State? I mean, can they beat Kansas and Texas Tech? And speaking of Texas Tech, they're my next potential conference winner.
I was wrong on both Kansas State and the next team in this prediction.
Going 9-4. I had doubts about Joey McGuire. Going into last year, I thought he was on a hot seat because Texas Tech didn't do good the year before. He is officially off the hot seat. He is no longer a part of the hot seat discussion. But I think that Texas Tech is going to go 9-4, and I think they have potential to win more than 9 games and make the conference championship game, but I don't think they do. My next potential conference winner is Arizona.
Okay, so Texas Tech, I was kind of close on saying their record, but I was also way off. And I do think Joey McGuire might be back on the hot seat.
And my record for Arizona is 11-2 in 2024. Now, y'all can say that I'm a little crazy for thinking Arizona is going to go 11-2 with all the guys they lost in the portal. But there's 2 guys that stayed to be with head coach Brett Brennan at Arizona, and it is Noah Fafita and T-Mac, which that's Noah Fafita's favorite wide receiver. And I think Arizona has a perfect chance to win the Big 12 this year in their first year in the conference. Next.
Okay. I'm going to laugh at myself for this because I was way off on Arizona. And I was also way off on the team that I had them playing in the conference championship game, which you will hear me mention in a second. But and you can laugh at me all you want in the comments too. I was way off on that.
My next team that's a potential conference winner for the Big 12 is Oklahoma State. And I know it's everybody's trendy pick. I have learned my lesson. Don't doubt Mike Gundy. And if you want to do it at your own, do it at your own faulty and failure, because it will come back to bite you in the behind like it did me last year. Last year, I had Oklahoma State going 7-5, and they overachieved. This year, I think they go 11-3 with the potential to maybe win 12 games. Now,
Mm-mm.
will they win 12 games? Who knows?
Mm-mm.
But my next conference
I was way off in left field about Oklahoma State. That's all I'm going to say.
winner, potential conference winner for the Big 12, is going to be West Virginia, who went 9-4 in 2023. I think they outdo that and go 10-3 in 2024. They've returned Garrett Green. Neil Brown got a contract extension, which Neil Brown was one of the coaches for me that was on the hot seat last year for before the season started. Now he's not. But I seem to think that West Virginia is going to have a really good season this year. And my last potential.
Okay. West Virginia fans, you can yell and scream at me all you want. I was way off on West Virginia. I apologize. I'm sorry.
Conference winner is another team that they just joined the Big 12 this year, Utah. And I have Utah going 12-1 in 2024.
Oh, God.
Cam Rising's back. Grant Keithy's back. Kyle Whittingham is still the coach. I think that Utah might win the Big 12. Like I said earlier, you're going to see who I think wins the Big 12 in a second.
Okay. I was wrong on Utah fans. Same thing. You can dog me in the comments. I was wrong on Utah. I will admit. Now let's see who I had in the
Now,
comments.
here's my top 5 teams in the Big 12. At number 5 is Kansas State going 10-3. At number 4 is West Virginia going 10-3. The only difference is I have West Virginia winning one more game in conference than I have Kansas State winning. Number 3 is Oklahoma State going 11-3. Number 2 is Arizona going 11-2, and number 1 is Utah going 12-1.
Here's my conference championship pick, which is utter yuckiness.
Is my Big 12 championship game. It is 11-2 Arizona and 12-1 Utah. And my Big 12 conference winner for 2024 is Utah.
Okay, I was very wrong on Utah. We'll leave it at that. And that does it for... That will wrap up today's video. I will see everybody back here on Monday with another video. I believe I might have a video Sunday. I don't know yet. Maybe a Sunday review of War Games, which is tomorrow night. And catch me over on TikTok streaming that, or just streaming talking about college football or anything else. But other than that, have a wonderful rest of your Friday.